thousands of people in the street gathered right in front of this house. Some tried to stand on tippy-toe and peek through the windows or hoist others up so they could look in, but the blinds were closed then and they couldn't see. And so throughout the night, with regularity, official visitors came to the front door of the Petersen House and were admitted to see the dying president. More than a dozen doctors came. They knew they couldn't help Lincoln. He had been shot through the brain. Some people came because they wanted to say one day that they had been here. They had seen the great Lincoln on the night he was assassinated. Some came so they could tell their grandchildren, decades later, I was there the night Lincoln died. And so more people were in this house who really needed to be here. It was certainly appropriate that the members of the cabinet come, but there were too many people here in this little house as Abraham Lincoln was dying. So Mary Lincoln would sometimes come out that front door of the parlor and venture to the back. And her female friends escorted her down this hallway. By then, the bed had been pulled away from the wall so the doctors could surround it and treat Lincoln and observe him. So several times during the night, Mary Lincoln sat in a chair right here next to the bed pulled away from the wall. She really couldn't control herself. At one point, when it sounded like Lincoln was gasping and about to die, she let out a terrific shriek that so unnerved Secretary of War Stanton, he said, "Take that woman out of this room and don't let her back in again," which was a cruel thing to say. Mary Lincoln did not have a lot of fans in Washington, but it was not right to treat her that way in the presence of her dying husband. But she was so upset and unnerved, she really couldn't bear to be in this room. And so she only made a few trips back here throughout the night. And she was not present when the president died. She was sitting in the front room. Lincoln lingered throughout the night. Many men would have died within minutes of being shot through the head the way he was, but he rallied. And daylight came, and around 6 o'clock in the morning, Secretary of the Navy Wells decided to go for a walk. He had decided that some high official should be at Lincoln's side throughout the night in the morning hours. And he really left it to Secretary of War Stanton to question witnesses, to begin the manhunt, begin the investigation, to see if other cabinet members aside from Seward had been marked for death. And Wells was here that night more as a mourner and witness for Lincoln, rather than a person who was active in the investigation and the activities that night. So Wells found it hot and oppressive and humid that morning, and he walked outside. A light rain had begun, and he was astonished to find several thousand people keeping vigil in the street outside. Many of them were black, either free men who had never been slaves or freed slaves, men and women, gathering in silent village. And Wells was touched by that. The street was silent. By that point, there was no shouting, there was no screaming. A hushed crowd stood outside. And they asked Wells, how was the president? What was to happen? And he couldn't answer them. So he came back, and by 6:30 in the morning, it was obvious that Lincoln was not going to last much longer. The breathing became more labored, less frequent. And so the doctors fished pocket watches out of their suit coats because they wanted to mark the moment when Abraham Lincoln died. And that came at 7:22 a.m. on the morning of April 15th, 1865. That was when Lincoln's heart made its last beat.